President al-Assad affirms that the armed terrorist groups receive money and weapons from abroad to shake up Syria's stability and foil any effort for a solution. The Russian Foreign Ministry says the so-called Friends of Syria meeting does not represent the interests of the majority of Syrians, and Russia will not participate in it. The terrorist gangs continue their crimes against the Syrian people. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our news for today. President Bashar al-Assad has received head of the Foreign Relations Committee at the Russian Duma Council, Mr. Alexei Pushkov, who affirmed Russia's support for the ongoing reforms in Syria and the necessity of continued effort in order to reach a political solution to the crisis based on dialogue among all concerned parties away from foreign interference. Mr. Pushkov stressed the importance of stability and security in Syria as a fundamental part of stability in the Middle East and the world. He added that Russia's stand stems from its keenness on commitment to the principles of international law and the realization of the interests of the Syrian people, asserting the need for the UN Security Council to avoid being biased to any side when it comes to the Syrian issue. On a spot, President al-Assad expressed appreciation for the stance taken by the friendly Russian people and leadership towards Syria and their keenness on being directly briefed on the reality of the assault targeting the Syrian state and society by the armed terrorist groups who are provided with money and weapons from foreign sides in order to shake up Syria's stability and foil every effort of a solution, particularly after the reforms that have been accomplished. The official spokesman of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Alexander Lukashevich, said his country has a lot of inquiries regarding the so-called Friends of Syria meeting to be held in Tunisia on the 24th of this month. He added that Russia does not see the possibility of taking part in such a meeting. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman pointed out that the matter has to do with lack of clarity on the significance of such meeting, which does not contribute to the beginning of national dialogue in order to find ways to overcome the crisis in Syria. Lukashevich said opposition groups in Syria were invited to the meeting, while government representatives were excluded from such an invitation, which meant that the interests of the greater majority of the Syrians who supported their country's authorities would not be represented. Lukashevich said it is doubtful that the meeting would help start a national Syrian dialogue, as its organizers alleged. He warned that it aims at forming an international alliance to support one party of the conflict in Syria against the other. Lukashevich added that a small group of countries are set on working out the final communique of the meeting without briefing other invitees who will be called upon to sign it, which sparks serious questions concerning this document. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman reiterated his country's call on the USA, Europe, and the region to unify efforts to ensure that a dialogue is conducted between representatives of the authority and the opposition in Syria without preconditions, and drive them to coordinate joint stance in order to implement reforms. He affirmed that the world community as a whole should work as friends of all the Syrian people, not as friends of a part of this people. Russia's permanent representative to the UN, Vitaly Churkin, has said that the Arab League had adopted decisions that are strange and repulsive when it headed towards the UN General Assembly, rejected the continuation of the Arab Monitor's work, and called for severing relations with Syria. He described such decisions as quite contradictory, causing Russia to reject them. In a televised interview with Russia 24 TV channel last night, Churkin said, 5 days after the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov visits to Damascus, during which he was briefed on a full program of reform, and after it was clear for Russia that this program was completely realistic and implementable, the Arab League took strange decisions that triggered astonishment, particularly when it refused the continuation of the Arab Monitors mission in Syria, proposed a joint peacekeeping operation with the UN, and called for severing all relations with Damascus. Lebanese Foreign Minister Adnan Mansour has announced Lebanon's rejection to take part in the so-called International Conference of the Friends of the Syrian People. Al-Manar channel said Mansour ascribed Lebanon's intention not to take part in the conference to its policy of alienating itself from what is happening in Syria and not intervening in its internal affairs on the basis of considering Lebanon's interest as the supreme priority. A workshop on the Syrian draft constitution was held last night at the Armenian Charity Society within the framework of shedding more light on its different items before the referendum on the 26th of February. More than the following.
A workshop on the draft constitution was organized at the Armenian Charity Society, highlighting the differences between the two constitutions. The participants included lawyers, thinkers and clerics, and many of them expressed confidence that the new draft constitution meets the aspirations of the Syrian society towards change, reform and development.
This workshop comes within the principles of the society, namely building the good citizen. Every citizen has rights and duties, and they need to know them. And voting is one of the top most important rights, and at the same time it is a duty. And particularly after 6 days, we are going to vote on the new constitution, and we want to tell people about it. It is very important during these days, during the reforms. And as we all know, one of the reforms is the new constitution.
Some attorneys added that it is an evolution of Syria's previous constitution and is much more sophisticated than any other constitution in the Arab world.
The Armenians are part of the Syrian people, and throughout the Syrian history, the constitution was drafted or amended in the presence of Armenian representatives in the People's Assembly. The constitution is a matter of great importance to the Armenians in Syria.
Attorney Bassam Sabbagh talked about the new items that are in the draft constitution, starting with the items related to the political system that is now going to count on political pluralism and exercising power democratically through the ballot boxes after the establishment of new political parties, the new items related to economy, business and taxes, in addition to the items related to empowering the woman.
As part of its continued attempts to target national qualified personnel and scientific and economic figures, an armed terrorist group has assassinated businessman Mahmoud Ramadan in front of his house in Halab al-Jadida neighborhood in Aleppo. According to TV news correspondent, a terrorist group in a car with an Idlib plate opened intensive fire at Mr. Ramadan when he was leaving his house, causing his immediate martyrdom. Ramadan was born 1969. He was married and had 4 children. He owned Shahba Rose Group for hotels and tourism. In Idlib, competent authorities intercepted an armed terrorist group who tried to storm into Haish police station between Khan Sheikhoun and Marat al-Nu'man. 5 terrorists were killed and 12 others were captured. The authorities found machine guns and RPG shells in their possession. Border Guard forces clashed with an armed terrorist group at a Salamiya area in Hama, causing the death of an officer and a sergeant and the injury of a corporal. Lieutenant Colonel Yasser Khudur Abbas and Sergeant Hassan Kharfan Basha were killed in a clash, while Corporal Abdul Hakim Hassan was injured. An official source pointed out that a number of armed terrorist group members also were killed and injured during the clash. On the Misyaf Bridge in Homs, security forces clashed with a terrorist gang using an ambulance full of armed terrorists. All the terrorists inside the car were killed. The car contained Russian guns, RPGs, night binoculars, and lots of various types of ammunition and machine guns. Before utilizing ambulance vehicles to carry weapons, the terrorist gangs targeted hospitals, medical centers, and medical staff. They killed more than 15 medical employees, wounded 27 others, and burned 48 medical centers, including Al-Qasir Hospital and Homs. The hospital was closed because the terrorists stole all its equipment. They also burned, sabotaged, and stole 138 ambulance vehicles while they were carrying out their humanitarian duty to help citizens. In Deir Zor countryside, an armed terrorist group kidnapped First Lieutenant Humam Turki Ramadan. The news correspondent said that an armed terrorist group kidnapped Officer Ramadan while he was heading for his unit at a civil car. Policeman Thair Marjan narrates the story of his abduction by an armed terrorist group who forced him at a gunpoint to conduct a television interview with CNN in the Lebanese area of Arsal after being beaten up and insulted by these groups.
On Saturday, I was attacked by a terrorist group while I was with my friends in a bus in the Qara area. They started shooting fire at us. After a minute, many people came on motorbikes. There were about 50 or 60 motorbikes. They took me to an unknown area in Qara, not far from the main street. I stayed there until about 11 o'clock. After that, they closed my eyes and they took me to a place that was called the Fleta. I stayed there for Sunday and Monday. On Tuesday, they took me to a third place, telling me that it was Arsal. There they brought us the US CNN station. And there was a translator, of course. I didn't see the man who was talking, but he was speaking English fluently, and he had a female translator. They taught me what to say, under the threat of gunpoint, to pretend that I was one of the Shabiha policemen and I participated in cracking down on the demonstrators and killing people. All of that was under torture, beating, and insults.
In Daraa, and within the context of targeting the educational infrastructure and sabotaging public buildings, the terrorist gangs attacked a secondary school and a medical clinic, causing heavy damages. The students were sent to another school while the first would be repaired. Such sabotage acts deprive citizens of the services provided by the clinic. Also in Daraa, the security forces defused a large explosive device weighing 25 kilograms, planted by a terrorist gang near the main circle of Busra, where the traffic is heavy near a primary school. The device was filled with highly explosive and inflammable materials used against armor. It was prepared for detonation by remote control. This was the third device to be defused in Daraa recently. A media delegation visited the Chinese embassy in Damascus, asserting the deep relations between Syria and China. The delegation stressed the necessity to continue visits by Chinese reporters to Syria in order to get acquainted with what is happening on the ground. For his part, Chinese ambassador in Damascus, Zhang Xiyuan, asserted the deep relations between the two friendly countries, emphasizing that China is following what is happening in Syria. The Chinese ambassador wished that security and stability be restored to Syria very soon through a political dialogue. With this, we conclude our news for today.